Good evening, everyone. I'll call this meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, first up is Citizens Forum, and I understand we do have one citizen set to speak.
Yes, Kelly Curran.
Kelly, please state your name and your address, please.
Kelly Curran, and I'm at 556 Hogan Trail, Sabisky.
I'd like to start by respectfully requesting increased time to discuss the matter I'm about to bring to the board's attention, as I feel it's very important for the board to understand the full scope of what I'm about to discuss, not only for my daughter and myself, but for the teachers, staff, and mainly the students of Sunnyside.
At this time, we have a 2-minute limit, so
Okay.
please speak. And you've addressed that you're talking about your student and staff. The public forum is not a place to talk about specific students or staff members. So if that's a specific issue, there are forums to discuss that, but your citizens' comment is not where that is. So if you're here to talk about a specific student issue or specific staff members.
It's overriding all of the students at Sunnyside.
Okay.
I am using my student as an example, I will say.
Well, you have 2 minutes.
Sure. So I live in Sabisky. I have 2 kids at Sunnyside, and my daughter has been struggling pretty significantly over the past 2 years in mathematics. She, every night, works for at least an hour or so on math with me and her dad. We do practice math books and everything, and she's continued to fail. She does receive Tier 2 intervention, and I do have a handout for the board if I'm allowed to hand that out to you guys.
It needs to go to Dana, because Dana has to log that information.
It's just explaining the tiered learning system, just in case some of the board members don't know what that is. But she's been receiving Tier 2 intervention for about 2 years now and has not made any progress. At the last board meeting, it was discussed how Sunnyside scores were low, and that was really kind of put the blame on the teachers. And I want to just say that as a parent, and discussing this with other parents, that's not how we feel. She has been struggling and is scored in the 5th percentile nationally and in the state exams. And that has been for the last several exams. And DPI says that Tier 2 intervention should last for about 6 to 8 weeks. It should be a short-term solution. And she's been in it for 2 years. And had I not done research as a parent to fix this problem, I don't think the school would have ever said anything to me about it, because they were happy letting her stay in Tier 2 intervention and not progressing it.
Your 2 minutes is up.
Sounds good.
Can we give her 2 more minutes?
If the board is interested,
Please?
know that we are not allowed to discuss anything that is presented tonight. But
Fine.
if the board is agreeable, you have 2 additional minutes.
The good news is, after months of begging for help, they did just agree to Tier 3 intervention services for my daughter, but my concern is, why did it take this long? And why did I have to fight so hard? And hearing the comments from the last board meeting, when the teachers were basically put to blame for the low testing scores, I have a very different perspective on that. I do know that the 4th grade went to leadership and asked for a very awesome app. It's called IXL. It's got great efficacy behind it, and leadership turned it down. And then they went to the PTO, and the PTO had approved that. So I just feel like that's really good data for how the teachers are trying really hard to help with our students, and leadership maybe isn't putting in as much assistance as possible. Another thing that I would really like to bring up is how Jennifer had mentioned our behavior is part of the issue in the scoring at Sunnyside. And in talking with a lot of the parents, yes, behaviors are a major issue at Sunnyside, and they are impacting our students' learning. So I would like people to consider that as well. I did have a handout that I would like you all to look at. It does have several questions that have brought to my eyes as far as doing research on Tier 2 intervention, how it's handled in Sunnyside. I know Glenbrook has 10 special education teachers. We at Sunnyside, and we're pretty comparable as far as how many people or how many students we have. We have 4. So I don't know if it's a staffing issue. I don't know what the issue is, but if I hadn't fought for my kid to get more supports, I don't think she would have. And I'm scared for the other students at Sunnyside that are struggling, that maybe don't have parents that are able to or that know what their rights are as parents. So I'm just trying to bring this to the board's awareness so that they can look into some of these questions that I have also.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Moving on to the next agenda item, which is overnight field trips, and the first one on the list is the Red Raider Wind Ensemble to Whitewater.
Yeah,
Is that you, Matt?
yes.
Okay.
So great news, we have 5 students at the high school that have been accepted into an honors band, an all-state honors band. Those students are Caitlin Katira, Reed Gussert, Ava Marshall, Samantha Reynolds, and Ryan Simmons. And so as part of that Wisconsin Concert Band All-State Honors Band, they've been invited to the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater to perform in that band. And so that's what that field trip for the 19th through the 20th is for.
Okay, great. I know we've talked about other musical field trips. In here it says there is a cost to the individual students. Is that an issue, and is that done through their traditional fundraising to cover those costs?
Yeah, that's exactly my understanding, is that's through their fundraising. So, and I know, as advocates, our music department, if any individual student had an issue with that, they would come let us know, and either the boosters or the building would help make that possible. So,
Tom is listed as the only chaperone. Is there also a female chaperone since there are female students?
that is a great question. My understanding was there was only one chaperone going. So if that's a concern with the board, I mean, I can talk with that.
Is that standard, Jenny? Do you know?
We have not had to have a female and I'm looking for how many students, so it's
There's
5
5
students, so yeah, as a FFA advisor, I'd have a van load of kids and I was a female and there were males there as well,
Okay.
so.
Yeah, I mean, as an example, to build on that, I mean, we've had, field trips earlier this year where either Mr. Pettis went or Mrs. Montgomery went, but not both of them.
That's the only reason why I asked. Is just a question.
Any other questions?
Motion to approve.
Second?
There's a motion and a second to approve the Red Raider Wind Ensemble to Whitewater field trip as presented. Any other questions or discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carried. Tell them to have a great time.
Thank you.
The next one is the fishing club to Stevens Point.
Yes,
Sticking
this
with
is
you.
from our advisor, Mr. Morgan, and this is, my understanding is this is an annual competition for our fishing club, which is great, and it is the state ice fishing event, and so it's in Stevens Point. Our club wants to go and compete, and weather permitting, they'll be able to. And
I was gonna say, is there gonna be ice?
We laughed, but last year I think was canceled because of poor ice conditions.
Oh, really?
So it's always in the realm of possibility.
so it's pending board approval and Mother Nature's water.
This one looks self-funded from an activity account.
Yes.
Any other questions?
Motion to approve.
Second?
There's a motion and a second to approve the fishing clubs to Stevens Point field trip as presented. Any other question or discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to the personnel report. Ally?
Yes, we have one contract to approve. So last month you saw a resignation from the middle school, so we're really excited to welcome Vicki on board. Pending board approval, she'll start on Monday the 16th, Tuesday the 16th. One of those days, right, Pat?
Tuesday will be your first day.
Thank you, with the PD day. So we're excited to welcome Vicki aboard.
I move to approve the personnel report.
I second.
There's a motion and a second to approve the personnel report as presented. Any other question or discussion? All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carried. Moving on to Act 20 updates. Jenny?
All right, so we have a team of people that will be sharing more and updating you about Act 20 legislation. So I'll introduce those people and they'll take different slides. So Rhoda Wood, who you've met before, as she shared some of our information about literacy and our HMH adoption and tools of the mind. She's our district reading specialist, so she'll be talking tonight. We brought in a heavy hitter from CISA 7, Shara Meyer, who has done a lot of work with us as well. Matter of fact, we're a part of a grant, which she'll talk more about, that she has been working with us. And like today, I had a Title I meeting, so got more information about Act 20 and kind of the personalized reading plans. That will be a component of those. And then Peggy Goddard is our elementary principal at Lenoy, and she is the representative for elementary tonight. So she'll talk a little bit about that training that's been happening and that grant that we are in partnership with CISA 7 with. So, all right, so that's the team that you'll kind of hear from as we kind of go through some of it tonight. I think we updated you and you had some alerts from WASB when this happened in July of last year. And so Act 20 went into legislation, and really what it requires is us to ensure that our curriculum that we're using for universal and for interventions is science-based literacy, or some of you have heard science of reading, structured literacy, all of those kind of fit into that. At the same time, it also prohibited what they call 3Qing method. I'm not going to get into that because that's on one of Rhoda's slides, and she'll dig into that a little bit more about what that is and what we have to ensure isn't happening in our curriculum. Along with this, they allocated for over 5 years $50 million towards this initiative in the state, and they modeled it after Mississippi Reading Plan as well as some other states that have done this as well. This is a potential sample budget. We happen to be in a meeting, and an individual who is one of the 9 people that are part of a committee, they shared this. It's not necessarily what the budget will be, so I do want to caution you on that. But basically with that, there's several components that they have to fund through this. And so there's 2 offices that have been established, and so some money is going to the establishment of those 2 offices. There is going to be 64 literacy coaches across the state. Now, when you think about that, that is 400 plus public schools, 64 coaches. There's going to be criteria to figure out how those people are allocated, and we'll talk when we get to another slide. But that is a large part of this. And then probably the professional development that's up here isn't enough professional development to cover 400 and some 25 districts in the state for the required professional development that has to happen. So a lot of us are assuming that's specifically for the literacy coaches and the work that they will do. And then I think originally in July when this came out, we shared with you that some of those funds would be used to compensate or reimburse districts for their reading curriculum. We had just adopted in March, not knowing that this legislation was brewing. So any of that is not able to be reimbursed. There's potential, and I'll talk about that when I get to that slide, of supplemental resources. But again, when you equate that and you know what we spent on our curriculum last year, it gives you a pretty good idea that that money, all of that $50 million, is not going to go a long way to cover what's mandated in this legislation. So some of these things have a direct impact on us, some of them don't. So some of these things I'll breeze through, but basically the first thing the legislation had is that we had to create an Office of Literacy through the DPI, and then they have a Council on Literacy which has 9 members. 3 of those members were selected through the DPI, 6 members through the legislation, and so it's a committee of 9. They make recommendations to the Joint Finance Committee and have different things that they need to keep on their project or on their list that they need to do. For example, one of their big projects that they're working on right now is to approve adopted resources that will end up on this list. So we'll talk a little bit more about that and how it impacts us. But this one is just a done deal. It's not something that we had a lot of impact or part of. Like I mentioned, literacy coaching becomes a part of this. There's going to be 64 statewide coaches. We are not anticipating being able to get access to these 64 coaches at this time. It's going to be based on third grade reading scores. Obviously, districts that have more needs because their scores are lower are going to get those coaches. And so, however, at the same time, and that's one thing that you'll see is in our slides, we'll talk about what we're doing in the district and how it hopefully bridges or builds that gap. So we have learning support teachers at all of our buildings. So they obviously will help out and be a big part of what happens with these components. We also have introduced student-centered coaches. We're coming up into our third year of implementation. So they do help and support our teachers with literacy instruction, both Tier 1, Tier 2, and then especially Tier 3 with our learning support teachers. So the next part are the things that really do impact us and that we have to have a plan for and look at how it impacts us. So there's the curriculum resources and instructional practices that we'll talk about tonight. There's the reading assessments, both screeners and diagnostic tools. There's the reading interventions and remediation plans. Today we spent time specific on the personal reading plan in the Title I meeting. There's family notifications that go along with that. And then there's an additional with a promotion policy 3rd to 4th grade and an intensive summer school program. Then that would need to be updated or revised with what we're doing currently for program support. And then you've heard us talk about that required professional development training as well. Rhoda gets this one because it's technical.
Well, so we wanted to I know we briefly showed some of this when we adopted our curriculum last year, but just to kind of revisit this about what is the science of reading. That's a term you probably hear a lot about. It's really a body of research that is really helping us understand the best ways to build a reading brain for our young learners. And these two are two visual representations of thinking of that model, kind of like a working model of that. The first one, the one on the right, is what we call the simple view of reading, even though we know reading is very complex. But it really, this kind of brings it down to two main areas that you're looking at. By using this equation, you're thinking about decoding, word recognition, being able to read the words, and then language comprehension is understanding that language. And with this model, I always tell when I train teachers, I love that it's a multiplication sign. It's not this plus this equals reading comprehension, but how intertwined those are. And one researcher, Scarborough, has developed this Scarborough's reading rope, and this is one where you'll see this often, and a lot of curriculums are pulling this in now, but it really takes each of those components of the simple view of reading and gives you each of the individual strands that you're looking at. Word recognition, things like the phonological phonemic awareness, decoding, and sight recognition, and then as well as the language comprehension. That's that background building, vocabulary, literacy knowledge, all of those areas. And the part of this model that I really like is how early on those things are very separate in instruction, and then as students build proficiency, automaticity, becoming more strategic, they start building together. So you see your upper elementary students, they will read a text and they can read the words as well as gain understanding and background information from that. With Act 20, I think we can go to the next slide. Act 20, those areas have been outlined as we need to have science-based early reading instruction. So that's really the components listed in the law include these 9 areas, and they are also represented on that reading rope. So things like the phonological awareness, phonemic awareness, phonics, those are going to be that lower part of the rope or that first part of the equation, that decoding piece. And then you get into more of the language comprehension pieces of that background knowledge,
oral language development, vocabulary, again, how this connects to writing, comprehension, and then as students become more proficient, that increasing that fluency. So these are the 9 areas that the law has outlined that need to be part of our instruction.
So we wanted you guys to be able to experience both sides of the rope. And since you can already read and decode, we're going to give you a simulation where you have to decode something, because we want you to see how, as Rhoda said, it is an equation with a multiplication sign. So if you have students who can decode, but they can't comprehend, anything times 0 is 0. So our goal is that reader who can read fluently and also read for meaning. That is our ultimate goal. We want kids to be able to read for meaning, and it takes both sides of that equation. So on the next slide, it's going to be a sentence rewritten in a made-up code. Also, just a hint, you need to read it from right to left. See where the punctuation mark is? So that's the end of the sentence. Just to add an extra level of decodedness. So you start at the right and move to the left. People in the back, go ahead. I'm not used to people sitting behind me, so if you want to participate, please do. But go ahead and break the code. What does this sentence say? If you need to write things down, you can. If you need to talk to a partner, you can. I also want you to have some metacognition about what is your brain doing right now in order to process this text. What are you having to do just to break the code? Because right now you're not even making meaning. You're just trying to get those symbols to equal something. What do those symbols stand for? Does anyone want to take a guess at the sentence, or have you broken the code? First word is kit.
Kit ran and hid.
Hid, yes, hid. Why is it not hide? There's not an E on the end, right? Actually, so all of those are three-letter words. Kit, ran, and hid. So what did you have to do in order to break the code? In order to magically change those symbols into letters and sounds? Because not only did you change it to a letter, we have the sound chart up there. So you knew that when you realized that letter, the second letter in and was an A, you knew it was an A instead of an A because of the sound chart that says at. So you have this cool little chart to help you understand the symbol and the sound. What did your brain have to do to process that?
I have no answer for that. Being honest, I have no answer for that.
Some of the symbols were really close. Like I mistaken the an M for an N.
So you
can see that where within the alphabet, when letters look similar, it's really easy for people to.
You had to differentiate that exact symbol and find that exact symbol replication on the chart and then match that to a sound. So that is the lower part of Scarborough's rope that Rhoda was just showing, breaking the code. We were talking about phonics, what is the sound, phonological awareness, phonemic awareness, putting that all together, and still our brains could make sense of that sentence, kit, ran, and hit, even though it was written backwards. That's the other side of the equation. If we go to the next slide, I'd like you to read this short statement up here. If you know the topic, please don't shout it out. This is the other side of the equation, focused on comprehension, vocabulary, sentence structure, making inferences. You can read every single word up there. You don't have to decode them. Use what you know about sentence structure. Look at some of the capital letters. What do we know about the word Strauss? What do you think that is? It's a name. Yeah. So when we read this, if we don't know the topic, you may have very limited comprehension with this sentence, even though you can read every single word. I've done this activity with some teachers, and I had one young teacher say, I think it has something to do with a boat. Why would she think that?
Skipper?
Motoring and skipper, right? Boats have motors, and they usually have a skipper. So she was using her background knowledge to try to make sense of this. So when we think about our kiddos in our classrooms, right, are they using both sides of the road? Can they break the code? And then once they break the code, can they put it together to make meaning? Do they have the vocabulary, the background knowledge? If you know that this topic is, does anybody know what the topic is?
Baseball?
Cricket. It's cricket. So if you know that topic, automatically your brain starts its little filing systems of what do I know about cricket? May have seen it, maybe I went to Florida, maybe I've been overseas, right? And you see the little paddles. So if teachers were going to, what would teachers use to support this? They might show a quick video. They would probably define some of these words. They would talk about the multiple meaning words like motoring and skipper. They would probably explain to the students a diagram. What does cricket look like? What sport do we know that it's similar to? Right? It talks about a sport, 34 balls, so I'm guessing it's a sport, but could it be basketball? Could it be baseball? Is it soccer? Right? So your brain is trying to make sense of it. So that was just a quick demonstration to show you both sides of the equation. And that our goal is for students to be able to break the code and then read for meaning.
Thanks, Charlotte. That's always, being in that position of what an early reader is like, because now being as adults with proficient reading, we sometimes forget. And that just that simple simulation shows how important both sides of the rope are.
I think also how long it took us to do that, and so think about a student as they're trying to decode. They're losing then the comprehension of what did I just do? What did I just read? So they have to put all those pieces together as a young reader.
It also helps explain the purpose and the need for our sound walls. Because if you hadn't had the sound chart, if you had just had that this symbol equals an A, you would have still had to try to figure out, is it long A or short A? You could have used your knowledge of the way words work, that if it's a 3 consonant vowel consonant and the A is in the middle, it's usually short. You probably could have used that and figured that out as a grown-up. That's what we're trying to teach our 5-year-olds. They're learning this, but yeah, you guys had a lot more background knowledge to try to figure it out.
So thinking of, with all that background on the science of reading, thinking about our Act 20 requirements. So one of the big pieces is it's prohibiting the use of instruction or materials that use the 3 cueing system. And what that system is it was a predominant method used to teach students how to tackle a word that they didn't know. When a students got to a word they didn't know, they were prompted to think about meaning. What would make sense in the sentence? They were also prompted to think about the structure of the sentence, like, well, what word would fit in that part of the sentence? And then they were also, then finally were directed to the visual information, which is looking at the letters and more of the phonics approach. So with knowing how our brains work and with the latest research, we know that students attend to all parts of the word, and that we want our primary method to be teaching beginning readers to use, like Charlotte said, use that sound code to help them decode words. So that's why this was included in the law according to that. One of the interesting pieces that as districts and even as working with teachers, it's like, because again, this has been such a part of education for the last 20 years, asking those questions to students to help them, helping reframe that, and even to say, well, does our curriculum have this? How do we know? DPI had 2 guiding questions that I think are important to think about. Is the 2 questions were to help educators is, does the curriculum and instruction follow a specific scope and sequence? So that follows a scope and sequence with both Tools of the Mind and Into Reading have. And then also, does the curriculum and instruction require learners to apply their knowledge of phonics to solve an unknown word? If that is the primary tool to help unlock and decode words, then they would say, yes, this does not use the 3 cueing system. So that's kind of those two things to help as we continue with the Act 20 work.
So one of those components that we said we'd talk about was the adoption of reading curriculum, or the 50% that they were indicating that they could reimburse school district up to, and that's with the adoption after January 1st. Right now, where they are at in that step is they're working on having a list to the Joint Finance Committee by February 1st. Originally, that date was set at January 1st, but they've kind of now moved that to February 1st. There's a 9-page rubric that goes along with this process, and I don't know, how many are they up to now? At one point, they only had 3.
They have 5 now. They have 5 now that have submitted all components that are required. There's a series, you can go on DPI's website and see what they're asking vendors to submit. But so far, 5 resources have all of the pieces submitted that they're going to be discussing and reviewing. They're actually meeting in person. The Early Literacy Council is meeting in person on Friday to talk about those 5. Vendors have until the 15th of January to submit. There were, I think, 2 more that they mentioned that are partially submitted, and they were expecting a few more to submit by January 15th, is what I heard at the last council meeting.
So, like we said, that doesn't really affect us, because we're not going to get compensated for the adoption that we just did last March in our Tools of Mind and Hodem Mifflin Harcourt's Into Reading for our K-5. But both of those companies are aware of the process and the requirements, and so obviously we've encouraged them to make sure that they end up on this list if they can.
Do you know if they're one of the...
Into Reading was one of the 5. Yes,
Okay.
it was. So it will be evaluated, and they're going to be talking about it on Friday. It was one of the ones. Yep.
What about Tools of the Mind? Do you
I
know?
did not hear that. Who is the publisher of that? Is it Tools of the
It's
Mind
Tools
is the
of the Mind,
publisher?
yeah.
I did not hear that on the list. So that might be one that I'm sure if we emailed one of the council members, we could ask about that.
And so that list is that they met those 9 criteria that Rhoda mentioned, that long list of things. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't have something that's not on that list and use that as your curriculum. It just means that you're not going to get compensated or be able to apply for the grant.
Well, and
to get
actually
that money.
the list of the 5 is what they're going to evaluate. It doesn't mean they still have to go through the evaluation process from the council in order to make the recommended list. So it was on the list for them to evaluate it.
On their 9-page rubric.
Yeah, it hasn't been reviewed. They haven't all finished their review yet.
Now, there has been some conversation that once that list is created, and depending on the money and who meets the grants, that say you have to buy more decodable text for your students to use, you could potentially, and this is up in the air, we don't know this for sure, but some of those supplemental resources or additional resources, you might be able to apply for grant money at that point. So we don't know that, but it might be an option. Reading assessments, we will be required to have reading assessments, which we do right now. So this one, when you look at it, it's really not an extra thing. It's just that the actual assessment will probably change of what we're required to use. So we still have 2 assessments in 4K. That will continue. We have 3 in K3. We have a beginning of the year, a middle of the year, and an end of the year. So it's just that we don't know what that screener will be. Right now we use FastBridge. FastBridge could be an option, but there's others out there like Dibbles. There's Maps, which we used to use. There is Star. There's iReady. There's a variety of them, and so we are hearing that we won't know anything about that until spring, and then that goes into effect for next school year. So that means whatever they select, we will have to do professional development with our teachers to ensure how they're providing the assessment, how to read the reports, how to then use that with their universal instruction as well as their tier 2 and their tier 3 in our RTI model that we use. So
Is it that there will only be one screener universally statewide?
Yep. And we used to have PALs, so there was several years that the PAL was being used, and then they moved away from that and then just said your screener had to have this, this, and this in it. And so then that's when we switched to FastBridge at that time. And we use FastBridge K8, so obviously we'll kind of wait to see what happens now. This though is funded, so this is something, just like when PALS was the screener that was being used in the state. We also though are reimbursed for 4K to 2nd grade or 3rd grade with FastBridge. So we just have to put in how many licenses, and then it's about up to $7.50 that they reimburse us. So this one we aren't, I mean, we're used to this type of schedule. It's just we don't know what the screener will be. It could still be FastBridge. There's some people that are convinced it's going to be. I'm not, but you know, we'll wait and see, and then we'll have to make that switch to that. The other thing is in other types of assessments, like our state assessment, a parent has the right to opt out of that. In this case, they're telling us in the legislation that you don't have the right to opt your child out.
Have they said anything about students that have like alternative in their IEP or alternative assessment? Nothing. I haven't heard anything either. I was just wondering.
So that is in regards to that.
Can, so for the screener, they wouldn't be able to opt out of the screener, but they can opt out of the state testing?
The state assessment, you can opt out of 4th, 8th, or 10th grade.
You can't
Yeah.
opt out of the assessment. That is-
Right, not on the screener.
Okay.
So. Rhoda?
Yeah, and so basically after the students take the screening assessment, and like I'll use our example with FastBridge, if we have students that are below the 25th percentile, our teachers work with our learning support teachers, and they dig deeper and do some diagnostic screening. With Act 20, we'll have 10 days to do that diagnostic assessment for those students. And then within that, the state will have a recommended list, but they are giving some local control with the diagnostic assessments. And that would be like digging deeper if it was a student did poorly on an oral reading passage and you thought, okay, they don't have some phonics knowledge, would be things like digging deeper into, well, which phonics skills are they struggling with, which phonemic awareness skills, some of those things really on that bottom part of the rope. We typically don't have a lot, and so I'm really looking forward to seeing what DPI puts out for diagnostic screeners to help with that language piece. So that's an area that is really, we're learning more about, and with our work with Charlotte and the Transformative Group, they're helping us with, you know, how to support students that are struggling on that top part of the rope. But we have more information right now about the students that struggle with the phonics and decoding the diagnostic assessments. So that would be then our teachers and our LSTs currently use those assessments, but we, like I said, depending on what the screener is, we try to have things that align as closely as possible with that.
Then along with that comes the reading interventions, and that has several components to it, but we have a very strong response to intervention system. The banner that you see hanging up on the wall is based on the work that we not only did with our universal core instruction, but then also what we do at our tier 2 and our tier 3 levels. And so, you know, you've heard us talk about what do we want students to know and be able to do. How are we going to know that they know that? That's the common assessment part, or that's those screeners and those diagnostic assessments. Then it really gets into what are we going to do for students who haven't learned it? That's our intervention. And then that fourth question of what are we going to do for students who have mastered it? And that's the extension part of it. And so we feel very good when we look at many of these components. And today in the meeting that we had, they actually shared Mississippi's personalized reading plan. And we'll work on, once the DPI releases their sample of what they want in a personalized reading plan, we'll then work in our EduClimb system that we have, our data warehouse. It also has forms that we use. So we'll incorporate all of these things in here to ensure that we are meeting those requirements. So you can kind of see we have to talk about skill deficiencies, those goals and benchmarks, interventions and services, the progress monitoring that's occurring, and then the programming and the strategies for parents to use at home. Will be the major components that will be in there, but we'll get that refined and put into our system that we currently use. Those remediation plans will have to be on our website, so along with the annual notices, we'll do our notifications to families. And then what they're telling us is that the vendor of whatever screener they go with will set those cut marks. They'll tell us what the 25th percentile is, so that those are then the students that have to have that diagnostic assessment that Rhoda just talked about. And then we'll work with the tier 2 and the tier 3 that need to happen with those personalized reading plans. Right now, we are currently, though, taking a closer look. So last year, the principals took that data when this legislation came out, and we started to look, well, what does that 25th percentile look like in our district based on FastBridge? Now, it'll be different depending on what the screener is, but usually we're near the 180, 190 mark when that initial screener was given in the fall. By the end of the year, it was down to 125 students. But if you think about that, in reality, that's still a lot of students to have individualized or personalized learning reading plans. But we'll just continue to monitor that. They're in the process right now of giving the second FastBridge. So I asked the principals today to ensure that they're entering that data, and I'm hoping we'll continue to see that same trend that we saw last year, that we can get that down to about 12 to 14% of our students that would stay on a personalized reading plan. Oh, Rhoda, did you want to say anything about that?
No, I mean, I guess you covered all of that. I think another piece of that is just as we get more professional development and the teachers are trained, some of the things we'll talk about, I think that will help even bridge that gap so it's even a smaller number as we keep working.
All right. Last year, we did bring to you the policy 5410. Part of that was to bring a committee together and not just, put a policy out there. And so we did have a committee of teachers from 4th grade through the high school level. The policy is 4th to 5th grade, 8th to 9th grade. And a lot of people are like, well, that doesn't make sense. Why isn't it 5th to 6th and 8th to 9th? It's all based on where federally we have to do all of the assessments to students. So if you think about in 4th grade, they have to take the literacy, they have to do math, they have to do social studies and science. They have to do that at 8th grade, and they have to do it at 10th grade. That's the rhyme or reason to it. And you're probably like, well, this doesn't make sense. It's all based on the old assessment, the WKCE, and how that all came about. We're not too concerned because we're sure the DPI said that they will come out with a model policy. We also know that Neola will come out with, their revisions to it. We as a team then will take a look at that and ensure that it ends up in our policy for 3rd through 5th grade. The one thing that it does include is that, especially from those 3rd grade reading scores, you then have to have an intensive summer reading program. And it was kind of interesting because the legislators thought that we could mandate and say to a parent, your child has to be at summer school. We all know that that's not the case. And so I think there was some, one of the first meetings, like the legislators were like, why can't you require them to do it? Well, that's just not going to happen. We do have a support program that our learning support teachers, our special ed teachers, and our classroom teachers encourage, when students have certain scores, to attend and participate in both literacy and math. And so, but we will look to make some changes because we probably have to lean more towards the science of reading and focus on those skill deficits that the students have. At the same time, trying to balance it that it is still fun, that they can still take other fun summer school courses. That's always been something that we focused on, that you can still be in swim lessons. You can still have that course that really intrigues you as well. Then we also need to do some supplemental program support for you as well. There's going to be reporting, so obviously we will work on whatever they tell us that needs to be reported, like the number of interventions to students. That's one reason why we're keeping track of it right now, to get a feel of what it looks like. So we will definitely do that as well. We'll be able to pull that information from EduClimber and get it uploaded to whatever report that they need us to do from the state level. Professional development. This is the one that we wished and we hoped and we waited, hoping that the state would come out with something to help districts pay for this. Rhoda and I met with Ames Pathways, which was one of them that we were considering, and then we ran numbers based on having to train 100 teachers to pay the company for their training, and then it's a minimum of 6 days, which equates to 36 hours of training. So whether you do that with subs and you take teachers out of the classrooms, which obviously we don't want to do 6 days of training, but then you still have to compensate the teachers for that time if it's in the summer or it's their evenings or it's their weekends. When we ran those costs, we estimated $185,000. We cannot use any of our title funds. We cannot use any of our IDA funds. That just came out in the last month. So, and there is no funding out of that $50 million for this. So it is, when we make a decision on which route we're going, we obviously we're hoping for some free things. This Cox campus came from our 2 coaches that we've been working with. However, it isn't on their list yet. We're waiting. They told us that it's going to be approved. That's a free thing that we wouldn't have to pay the companies. Now we would just have to worry about the time for teachers or the subs or whatever approach that we take with that. There's other ones that are about $300 to $350 if we partner with CISA on, you guys are doing keys, right?
I am, and services.
Keys or letters. Letters is very, very intense. So we might do that more with our learning support teachers who are our interventionists, and maybe some of our special ed teachers that we do that with more. So we're working on that part of it. We've waited. Some districts jumped on this right away. They did keys and they came out of the gate, and I was like, well, I'm gonna wait. We're gonna sit back. Our teachers did a survey. They'd had some training, so we're hoping by spring to make that decision, working with our coaches through CISA and the TRTG to help guide us into what is the best training that services our teachers the best in teaching structured literacy.
So, as Rhoda said, that they've been partnering, we qualified for a grant. Motion 57 was a bill that came out before Act 20, so last school year Motion 57 came out. There were several parts of Motion 57. One part was $4,000 for the district to use for letters training. I believe Rhoda, did you utilize that?
Yeah, we used that. We actually trained with that 4,000. I went through several things and then was able to partner with some Ames training for literacy leadership, letters. We also had some of our learning support teachers go through an Orton Gillingham training, which is a more intensive structured literacy training. So we were able to do that at the 2 title buildings with that $4,000.
And there was another component of Motion 57 that was explicitly to help grow the capacity of CSAs, but also they wanted us to partner with a district in order to build the capacity of the leaders in that district. And so working with Nell and Terry, who you're about to meet in this quick video, they have a quick little video that they made to introduce themselves. They were here for 3 days in October. We split up all of the elementary principals, special ed folks were there, just about everybody, all of the leaders. Jenny was there, Allison was there, all the leaders in the district were there. We visited, I think, just about every single pre-K, kindergarten, first, second, and third grade classroom. And so, or at least second grade, up through second grade, we were able to see. And we kind of split up. Some of us were with Dr., her name is Danielle Thompson, but everybody calls her Dr. Nell, or Terry Noland. And so we were able to visit. They were here for 3 days. We all did this. And then we had a big session at the end, and I'm sure you're going to explain more about that during your slide. But part of motion, that is all grant funded, so it's not costing the district anything to do that. And it's not costing us as CISA 7 people anything to be partnershiped with that. But we could have partnered with any district in our region, in the CISA 7 region, which goes all the way from Washington Island all the way down to Cedar Grove, Belgium. And when I was working with Terry and Nell to try to decide which district to partner with, I said, well, who should we be looking for, right? Because this is a very large grant, like $65,000. So who should we be looking for? And they said, you want leaders who are ready to make big changes. You want leaders who are already learning about science of reading and who are intrigued by it and want to know more. You want leaders who are in a district probably between 3 and 5 elementary schools. And you want leaders who are ready to learn and who are ready to shoot for the stars. And I automatically thought of Pulaski. Rhoda has had an immense number of training in science of reading. She's done letters, she's done AIM Institute, and going through and helping you guys with your H of H implementation and adoption, they were already ready to make a change. I've worked extensively with many of the teachers as well, and they were all ready to make a change. The teachers were ready to make changes, the leaders were ready to make changes. So I said, well, I have the perfect district in mind. So that's kind of how all of that came to be. And so this is a quick video that they made just to kind of introduce themselves and give you a little bit more information about our work.
Hello everyone, I am Nell and I am with the Transformative Reading Teacher
It's not in here though.
group, and this is my colleague Terry Noland. We are here just to say hello and let you know we are part of the Motion 57 review team with the CISA 7 group, Charla Meyer and Sarkis Wetland. So we wanted to say hi and let you know who we were. We are coming into Pulaski and hanging out in the rooms, and we really appreciate being present in Pulaski. And so, Terry, you want to add to it?
Yeah, so one of the things that we want to make sure we do is up-level those around us and provide leadership, provide information around the science of reading, because our goal is to set Pulaski up for success. Success starts with consistency. Nell, tell them about consistency.
Yeah, so one of the things when we're looking at the science of reading and shifting our practices and doing things that we're being asked to do, but not necessarily just because it's in compliance, but because it's really what's best for students. And one of the things that is best for all students is a consistent approach to how we teach this reading brain. This reading brain is not natural at all. It needs to be taught in a very explicit, systematic, and direct way. And that means that we teach a structured literacy template, which is something you have invested in as a school district with Into Reading and the structured literacy template, which is amazing. So that template allows us to deliver a very sequential, very direct, very explicit process every day, so we can build on the reading brain's foundation every day, adding something new. Just like when a basketball player learns to play basketball. I coached, and one of the first things I would do with young children was like, let's just hold the ball first. And in the beginning we said, let's just learn about these letters. And then we add to that, and we build the reading process, and we build that neural structure in the reading brain, which is profound. And if we do it the same way in all classrooms, it brings equity, and that consistency compounds. And we all know something about compounding interest in a bank account. It gets bigger. And so when we do that with our students, those who are most at risk and need us to be the most consistent, it will compound over time, and we get readers over time.
And I want to make sure that we are clear in understanding that Tier 1 instruction, that core instruction, that's where we want to spend a lot of time. This approach, this science of reading, that is where we need to make sure that it's strong, because then the consistency that I get what I need in Tier 1 instruction, and if I am a student at risk, then we move to the interventions that are going to be consistent and making sure that that compounding effect is going to happen, because our goal is readers.
So thank you for your time. Thanks for listening. We are grateful for your willing to partner with CISA 7 and really evolve your practices and thinking and work, because this is work we're doing across the nation. And all of our students are getting more clear instruction in reading across the nation. And this is exciting that you are taking this on to be front runners of this work and really leading the way and showing how we can implement evidence-based practices. So have a great board meeting. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I am now.
What's enough?
What's enough? So just, I mentioned most of this, but this is being again funded by Motion 57 grant. They are our external coaches, Dr. Danielle Thompson and Terry Noland. They've been working with elementary school principals. I think you're going to tell us a little bit more about that. And that whole idea of ramping up the leaders' capacity, that will also help support the teachers and build their capacity as well.
One of the things forgot to mention is that professional development also includes our administrators. And our administrators were happy to hear that this work counts as their professional development. So when we kind of announced that yes, we're investing all of this time, but it counts for your training, they were happy. Oh, I advanced, I think. Nope,
I think we're
all
good.
right.
Yep.
So Jenny mentioned earlier that the teachers took a survey in the fall, and we were trying to gauge what their knowledge was in terms of early literacy. And we learned that, I think a general comment is that they were quite confident about what they knew, but sometimes we think we know how to do it, but we can't quite articulate it, or we can't show proof of that in the classroom. So as Charla mentioned, they came in and we toured every K-2 classroom and LST learning environment to really see what was being done in terms of early literacy by each of the teachers with the students. And they were able to teach us what the recommended strategies were and practices were in those classrooms and look for those gaps. We talked about, as we did a process check after, what those quick wins were and some of the actionable items are that we can address right away. And we meet with them every month to continue talking and learning from those coaches on how children learn their early literacy skills, how they acquire that knowledge, and what we can do as leaders to support the teachers and to ensure all of those recommended practices are actually happening in the classroom. So we're learning, our teachers are learning, we're learning right along with them and kind of partnering and making sure that we're filling in those gaps and moving forward.
And you have links to that classroom observation and what people were looking for, and you also have then kind of their quick win sheet that Peggy mentioned. And Rhoda and I probably meet about every 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and okay, where are we at? What's the next win we're going for? How can we implement it? How can we not overwhelm our teachers? But and so that gradually happens as we take a look at that as well.
Sure, I can start this one. So with looking at those pieces and meeting with Jenny, we said, you know what, one of the things that really came out is building the teacher's knowledge of the 44 phonemes of the English language. We have the 26 letters of the alphabet, but then there's so many sounds, and then of course all the multiple, even more than that, sound spellings. I forgot the number off the top of my head, but it's, many, many ways to spell those sounds. So helping teachers build that through consistent sound spelling walls. So that was a big thing. Charlotte kind of talked about that with providing, first of all, developing that resource, the copying, the laminating, all of that, but then training teachers on what does it mean, how is this helping our students, and then kind of aligning that with the tools of the mind. So through their visits, this was one of the first items that we were able to do, and Charlotte and I presented to kindergarten, first and second grade.
Yeah, we had a half a day training with each of them on this. So we were already able to push forward some of those quick wins, and at those trainings, I felt like teachers were extremely happy to receive that, like they were looking for it, they were ready for it. And we also had speech pathologists in those meetings, which was really helpful to have as well. Because we had the EL teachers, special ed teachers, speech pathologists in those trainings, so we were able to start with that quickly and right away.
And actually Rhoda and one of the speech therapists are also doing 4K on Tuesday when we have professional development.
Yeah, so continuing that training and then as we continue working with 3rd through 5th grade, again, providing support for them and then continuing, we, as Peggy mentioned and Charlotte mentioned, those monthly meetings is we're getting more information each time, and as we learn more and ask questions, again, supporting that whole process. It's similar to all the other parts of Act 20, but really getting those diagnostic assessments and then into the interventions or, as they mentioned, that universal piece of that structured literacy.
And they're coming back for a day in March. We'll be here for the day, meeting with the leadership team for that full day as well.
So the timeline, this is kind of where we're at. This came right from DPI and that Council for Literacy as they kind of have rolled it out. So they were shooting for January 1st date. Right now it's a February 1st, and it sounds like they have to meet that deadline for the Joint Finance Committee. You can see the work that happened before this at the state level, and you can kind of see there's 2 slides with that where they head. We anticipate in the spring to know what that screener looks like. And then you can kind of see the next parts that fall into place with the reading data being shared at the DPI level and those local reading data that needs to be done, the PD that the staff members have to do. Now, at one point, it had to be completed by July 1st. They did change that, or July of 2025. Now it has to be started by that time. So that's why we have a little bit of time to really make a good decision on which one that we go with. One of the things, and I won't open it up, but had picked this up from another district and then we fine-tuned it and we kind of made it our own. So you have access to this document, but we come back and we've taken all of those components of the Act 20 bill, so it's multiple pages, and then we reflected on what's our current status, what are we doing, and where do we have to go next steps, and so that's specific to our district, so you can kind of see. Just updated it today while I was in the Title I meeting, and she was showing some different slides on the screener, on the diagnostic assessment, on the personalized reading plan. So I put in the Mississippi example in there, updated our data as well, but then we kind of have that progress check of, okay, where are we at? Is it not started? And sometimes it's not within our control because it is at the state level, and then there's other ones that are at our control. So you'll see that we've started it. There's some things that are complete as well. There's not a lot of green on there yet, but we'll get there. So that opens it up for, I know you asked questions as we're going along, but other questions that came across that you'd like to ask of any of the people here.
So this current budget that we're in, the implication of this budget, you estimated at 185. Is there any, like this curriculum, if they don't adopt, if our curriculum isn't one of those that we adopt, they will pay for 50% of it, is that right?
Up to 50%.
Up to 50% of it. So what does a curriculum like that cost? Like what's the, if they don't, I know, that's what I'm afraid of.
So last year, when we brought that proposal to you, it was about $425,000 to do a K-5 adoption of literacy. Yeah, so, and if you remember, we eliminated 2 right off the bat that we didn't even, so our process was that we had like 10 in this room for 10 days and people could come and take a look at them, and then that group narrowed it, all of our teachers could come and take a look, they narrowed it to 4. We did not even proceed with 2 of them because Benchmark Literacy was going to charge us $25,000 just to pilot it, and we were like, I can buy a lot of books with $25,000. And then the one that probably would have been the leading one and probably been the one we adopted was, they were saying like over $1 million. And we're like, we can't do that. So those came off the table and then we were down to these 2. just talked, Rhoda and I met with another district in the area that's in this process right now, and they're actually down to the two that we were down to as well, right? Or are they still, Benchmark is still in the running?
Benchmark is still in the running, but they wanted
Between Savis or
the two that we piloted, they're trying to decide on which one they're gonna pilot or look closer at, between Savis or Into Reading.
The $185,000 is the professional development, which there is no funding
Yep.
for that. That is on the district's back.
But that's gonna hit this current year budget, right?
I don't think we'll be this year. It'll be next year.
Okay,
Because we'll make a decision in spring, but then we'll probably put it into a play
next year.
somewhat in July or.
Okay, and then is that when that curriculum would hit too, if we're forced to buy something different?
We
You
won't
won't
have
be
to buy
forced
anything
to.
different.
You don't
no.
have to.
Okay,
Their recommended list is if you want to apply for the up to 50% reimbursement, you have to adopt something that's on their recommended
gotcha,
list.
okay,
But what they're not saying is that you have to stop using something and unless it's the 3Qing system. No district should be using a 3Qing system. But they're not saying that you can't use this resource or this resource or this resource just because it's not on the list. What they're suggesting to folks because a lot of districts have just gone through the process and just have recently adopted something new. And so what they're saying is if for some reason your newly adopted resource doesn't make the list, you can do a crosswalk and see what parts of it didn't make the list and would we need to supplement that part. And since they are reviewing Into Reading, they would provide some kind of report that says, yes, it matches these 9 out of 9, or it matches these 8 out of 9. And they'll provide some kind of a report. So then the district could say, okay, maybe we do need to beef up this 1 or 2 areas.
gotcha.
Yeah. But they're not saying if it's not on the list, you can't use it. That's not what the
What's
state is saying.
frustrating is that districts that were ahead of the game.
And part of it was that the English language arts standards came out, and so that generally is what happens. If you're going to make a change, you usually make a change after there's new standards, and so, and ours was partly because our teachers were also like, we need a different resource, so.
But it sounds like this HMH and Tools of the Mind is pretty good, like good results. Everybody who's using it sounds very happy.
I think Into Reading's going to make the list.
I would be surprised if it did it, but that's my opinion. So I'm definitely not on the Early Literacy Council.
And all of this has to be in conjunction with making all your other markers and things like math and science and social studies.
Correct. Yep. New CTE standards are coming out, so.
We're gonna keep everyone busy.
Yeah, so we just wanted to make sure that you were aware of it. In summer, we just kind of said, hey, this was adopted. I think we brought it up once or twice as we've been talking about our data and our adoption. But we wanted to go deeper into it and spend some time with you on it, so you were aware of the implications to the district.
That was good, thank you.
Thank you all. Does anybody else have any questions? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next thing on the agenda was a consideration of consolidating a polling location. That request has been rescinded. So as it stands, we do have a primary election for the at-large position for the school board. And all of the polling locations will be open. So whatever polling location you usually vote at is the polling location that will be available for both the primary and general elections. Moving on to the superintendent update.
Only 2 things to update. First one is Golden Apple, not the finalists, all of the people who were nominated and then moved on in the process, that was released last week across the partners in education. So we had almost 150 across our district that were initially nominated. And then the process is that we have to, and we can only, which is a bummer, for our smaller buildings under 500, you get 1 representative to move on, and then if you're 500 or more, you get 2. The process used to be that anybody who wanted to move on could, and that was kind of nice because multiple teachers from buildings could do that. So, and then now we await for the announcement of Teacher of Distinctions. They're telling us January 26th for that announcement, and generally those people get to move on in the process and probably have an interview, produce a video, whatever it might be, And then sometime in February, they'll come and surprise those people. We've been fortunate to have at least one person, so we're hoping to continue that trend. And then April 17th is when that happens, and all of you are invited to that as well. And I think we moved the board meeting that night to a different date, so you can attend if you'd like. So, and then we're coming off of Tournament of Roses, and so thought we have Colton here with us, who was there, who still is tired. Steve was the administrator that needed to go along for chaperoning. So between the two of you, if you want to share kind of your experience, that'd be awesome.
It was definitely a lot of fun. I was really happy that I was able to go, and I was happy that our entire music program was able to go, because it was a lot of like camaraderie together as a group, being able to do that, and it was a feat. Definitely not a lot of other bands get to do it, and we did. I think that's really impressive for us, and it was just a lot of fun. It made us really tired, but it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, to that tired piece. I can attest to the fact that I slept more my first night back than I did the last 3 nights there. And it wasn't because we were chasing kids around. That's how full our days were. We were waking up. Most days our schedule was 5 o'clock or so was wake up, and kids may not know this, but usually after their last call, then we usually had another hour and a half of discussions with all the chaperones about what the logistics are the next day, to make sure all the questions are, everyone's on the same page going into the next day, because logistically, we were usually moving in between 5 and 7 buses. Just the trip down there was 5 different flights going out of 3 different airports. So again, logistics were crazy, but like I told the kids with my pep talk / just reviewing of expectations, like you just gotta go with the flow, be patient. There's gonna be a lot of hurry up and waiting, but just be patient and gracious to each other, and then likewise just live in the moment, take it all in. And likewise, my thank you message to all the students afterwards was very much echoing those things. They represented Pulaski, the state of Wisconsin, very, very well. There were so many times people would come up and you're wearing your Pulaski stuff, and they would approach us, me as an adult, and say, "Hey, how are you connected?" And you know, I got to say, "Well, they're all mine." But ultimately, so many great stories to be shared. People were always impressed with the demeanor in which the students carried themselves. The tour company that was guiding us, hosting us, they're not so much hosting us, but guiding us, you know, had such great things to say about the patience of our students. Again, how their level of respect, they don't always see that. And of course, then when you're in a different location, in many cases, I don't know if you ran into this, but people would act, without saying, Pulaski's got to be in the Midwest because of just how you're handling yourself more than anything. Like, so many times, it was just great to see, like, bus drivers. They were thanking bus drivers getting off the bus, saying, "Hey, thank you for," you know, just saying thank you. You don't see that in so many other places. And then ultimately, like I told the kids in my thank you, it's like, I hope that you were able to live in the moment, because now every time you hear Tournament of Roses or the Rose Bowl, you're going to have just a whole different perspective on that once-in-a-lifetime event, and have such greater appreciation for it moving forward.
Megan, you were there as a parent, right?
Yeah, it was amazing, and I just have to say, we ended up having to sit next to all the Alabama fans, so we heard Roll Tide probably like 5,000 times. Michigan was across from us, but they thought our band was a college band, and so they were like, "Holy cow, they are amazing, I can't believe." And so it was just interesting everywhere that we went, how people were just so impressed with the kids, you know, just as individuals, but then just collectively, what they brought in their performances. I mean, you know, when you see the Tournament of Roses parade, president and his wife doing the polka out on the field, I was like, yes. So it was cool. It was a really, really great experience. So.
Thank you, guys.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We have our next meeting, which is our business meeting, on January 24th. It was moved due to the state convention, which 3 of us are attending next week. At the next business meeting, we will have the annual space available determination for open enrollment, more out-of-state field trips, and administrative contracts in closed session. Tonight, we do need to move into a closed session to consider early graduation per Wisconsin Statute 1985 1F. Is there a motion to move into closed session?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second to move into closed session. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carried. Good night, everyone.